Hey, it's Curious Dude. In tonight's garage time, we'll pull off the oil pan and have a look. We'll pull one rod and piston combo, take some measurements and see what we find out. So, first order of business will be to remove all of the pan bolts, obviously. And they're a mix of 1/2 inch and 3/8, and there's a pan rail on both sides. So I'm going to save some time and use an impact driver. Nothing odd at all there. All the bolts look original, very factory. So, pull off. They're the same on both sides. Got this and this. All right. And I could see that it was pulling off already, so I think, yeah, just like that. We'll just lift that off and have a closer look. Oil pump. No crazy sludge on there. I'm looking, no pumps, no cracks or anything on the oil pump. Looks like to be a factory Ford one on there. Look at the timing chain. I mean, lots of oil staining, but there's nothing scary in here. There's no bits of metal. There's no shiny anything. It has a one-piece oil pan gasket, which I don't know if that's factory or not, but that's great. It looks like it was over-tightened here a little bit, but that's great. We can see one skirt on that piston. When we pull that, we'll get a closer look at it, but I don't see any debris or anything. We look at the oil pan pickup. Look at that screen, like very clean, right? No gunk, no gasket material, nothing in there. So, everything at first glance looks as it should, nothing odd. So we will take a look. What I'd like to do is we'll take cylinder number 1 and I'll loosen off the rod cap, clean it up a bit, and we'll put it back down to the right torque spec using some plastic gauge, and we'll get a rough idea of the clearance, at least on one of the rod bolts, or on one of the rods to the crank. Just tell us a little bit about in terms of how much wear is going on, and then we'll take a look at the bearing and inside the cylinder. If you didn't know, small block Fords, the rod caps, the end cap and the rod are stamped based on the cylinder they're in. So cylinder number 1 is 1 and 1, and that also tells us how that rod and cap mate up, and that's true for all of them. So if we go down here, there we can see that's a 3 and a 3 and how they match up. And so that also helps us know what cylinder we're dealing with. So we're going to loosen number 1 rod cap off, and we'll do some measurements and see what we find out.
Just pop this off.
That's the sound. A little cracking sound will mean that'll come off. We'll take this off and have a look. Well, that's the bottom of the cap. There's no bearing in there, so we're going to have to figure that out, of course. And like I was saying, see there's a 1 stamped on that side. That'll match that way, and the other side is not stamped. So I'm just going to set this aside for a minute. I need to get this bearing off. So what I'm going to do, push the cylinder down push it down slightly. Expose it totally, and we should be able to pull this bearing out here. There we go. Okay, finally. Here's the bearing out. Let's give it a clean. Let's take a look at what we see there. So, there's the bearing as seen. So, we can see there's some, there's some wear on there. Feel it, which is good, but definitely some, some slight wear on it. Especially there. Right on that spot. A few kind of scratches ground in it, but looks okay. And if we read the back, we should be able to get a little bit of information off of it. The first thing we see is a Ford part number, which would kind of make sense with it. And to look this up a little closer, but that's a factory Ford part. But I think if it was like a factory oversized or undersized bearing, there'd be some indication of that on there. but I'm assuming that is just a completely stock bearing. So looking at the crankshaft journal itself, it's very smooth. Like running my fingernail across it, like there's no noticeable wear. Nothing feels really uneven in any way there. So that's right on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use some plastic gauge, some green plastic gauge, which is 001 to 003. And so I've cleaned the journal, and I'm going to set this across it, like so. And then I'm going to put my cap back on the correct way. And we'll crush it down to the correct spec, and we'll measure it, and we will see what it measures at. Now, I'll eventually do this for every single rod. Actually, that's not true. I actually am going to have a machine shop do the measurements. This is for my own peace of mind to know what I'm starting with, to see how big the clearances are. It'll give us an indication on overall health of the engine, which so far has been positive. However, that can change. So I'll just snug this down before I get the torque wrench. Rod bolts are not very tight, but all right, now I'll switch over to the torque wrench and we'll make sure we get it at the right setting. So these only get torqued to 25 foot-pounds. Okay, that's all we have to do there. Now we will pull off that rod cap and see how much crush is on that green little piece of plastic gauge.
There, it's crushed in there. I'll zoom in so you can get a proper look at it.
More of that, a little bit of a green line. So this is the gauge you use it against. So we'll lay it down and kind of figure out, right? So it really only fits the narrowest band on here, which is right, that little white stripe right there would be about dead on. It might be a little bit bigger than that. So if we read that little tiny white stripe, we are at, come on, focus. Yeah. Oh, that's in mils. We don't want that. Can't think in mils. Okay, on this side, it is in inches. It is 0.003, which, well, let's see that again. Maybe it's slightly bigger than that, but you know what? It's sort of in between the green band and the white band. It might even be closer to the green. So again, this is like not the most scientific, but it'll give us an idea. And the green is 0.002. And I believe the factory spec is like anywhere from like 0.008 to like 0.03. So if it's somewhere in that, 002, 0025, somewhere in there, like that's not horrible. I'd say that's like, I'm going to go and check on that, but I think that's nothing scary about that. That's kind of acceptable. And the reason that matters, of course, right, is that's going to determine whether or not it's going to require oversized pistons or oversized bearings, or the crank has to be polished, that sort of thing. So let's pull out a cylinder. Let's pull out number 1, and then we can get a little bit of a better look at everything that's going on inside there. So to pull this piston, we're just going to push down on here, and I'm using a rubber mallet, but you know, this will not take much work. We just want to be careful of the crank that we don't scratch it all up with these rod bolts, because the ends are a bit sharp on there. A little bit of work, make sure we clear that. And this piston will pop right out the bottom now. Needs a little bit of love on the bottom here. There we go. That is out. So, there we go. That is cylinder number 1, rod, all factory. Let's give this a bit of a wipe here too right away. You can see the skirt has a tiny bit of wear on there, but not very much. We got lots of oil staining, all kinds of oil staining. On this side, maybe a little bit more scuffing, but you can't feel anything. But top of the piston, let's clean it up a little bit. I might actually be able to get some part numbers off here now. So lots of carbon on there. The dot faces forward if you look in the other videos. Rings, so they do rotate fairly freely. The oil ones may be a little sticky, but you know, ring lands are probably pretty dirty. I see some carbon buildup along there, obviously, but they do all move. Piston floats okay. It's pretty snug, but there. Look at this bearing here. That bearing shows us a little bit of copper, so that's a good example there. Okay. Okay. So you can see there, we see a little bit of shiny copper coming through there. So, you know, that side has a little bit more wear, certainly than the other side. So that's a little bit telling, like, you know, it's had some harder miles on it. A little bit more wear prevalent there. So we'll see if I can see inside the piston. Again, I'm trying to find a part number on the piston to see a little bit more detail about it, but unfortunately, it's really hard for me to see. So I'm going to go and see if we can get a little bit more light on here. And we'll do a little deeper dive on the piston here in a little bit. So I'm just going to set this aside and we'll look at the cylinder. And I'll get some light we can put in there. A little look. Okay. So you should be able to see the reflection there as I feel. Take a little closer look with you this way. So again, you can readily see the cross hatching. There's a little bit of discoloration in the chamber. There's a little discoloration in the cylinder. They are, I would say, pretty smooth though. Like pretty smooth. No real noticeable ridge on the top or the bottom. Yeah, that's I think that's a good sign. So definitely going to need to do a little bit more work, but let's take a closer look at a piston, see if we can get some part numbers off it now. Patience paid off here. If we look inside here, we can clearly see the Ford logo, Ching, and a part number, F3ZE AA 3552-C. And that, the Z, the Z, it refers to Mustang. So we know these are Mustang pistons. Now, I will go and do some cross-referencing and figure out exactly what these are spec'd for, and then we'll know. But these are factory Ford pistons, and I'm hoping to reuse them. All right, well, that ends garage time for tonight. Thanks for watching. Learned a little bit more about the overall internal condition of this 5-liter motor. We'll finish blowing it down, tearing it apart, and then it will be off to the machine shop, and watch for a video to overview what will be done. Thanks for watching.